I'd now like to call up Michael Montella.
I came to know Dietrich in 1997 when the town was sort of turned upside down with a group of people that decided to want to take over politics in the town. And I had only lived here a few years prior with my partner, my wife Bev. And I remember in the Bluestone Press in the early days, there was a big snowstorm, the first winter we moved up a few years earlier. And it was Scott Cranen, who I miss sorely, and is still with us but couldn't be here today, and Dietrich Werner were on a photo from the Main Street Business Association, trying to figure out how to get the snow cleaned up of Main Street. I said, who is this guy? He looks like Santa Claus. I kept on seeing him at the post office. Who is this guy? Well, I got to know him and Gail, and many of you that are here, Brian and Nana and a number of us from the community worked together. And we're successful in many ways to sort of change the path of politics in the town. And that was, I have very fond memories of that and became very close. But there's a particular story. As a result of that, there was an opening on the board for the Century House, and I was invited to be a trustee of the Century House for a number of years. And one of the first decisions that they had was they were looking to recover money from the lawsuit that ensued from the Raven Cave incident, and the Century House was really broke. The Historical Society was broke. And there was a logging company that wanted to give the society money to clear certain select trees on the property. And I remember it was a warm December, and going for a walk with Dietrich down length of the property that runs north up towards Sawdust Avenue, and part of abuts the Iron Mountain property. And we were looking at the trees, and many of these trees were like, hadn't been cut. They were like maybe not old growth, but second growth or whatever. They were really mature trees, really beautiful trees. And at the time we had a meeting, the yearly annual meeting was at the Clove Valley, which is across from the Egg's Nest. It's gone through a number of different owners since then. And we had a discussion about whether we were going to take this money. And Dietrich made this passionate argument about how if we cut these trees down, they're gone forever, and we'll just find another way of coming up with the money. And that was one of the things that I remember early on, other than all of the craziness around the political campaign and the caucuses and everything, but it just showed something about him that shone through. I have other stories also about when we bought our house and I was doing all of the plumbing, and he was a retired plumber, and it was like, how the hell do I do this? And he patiently sat with me and drew diagrams about how to do venting and waste plumbing and all of these different things. And I probably wouldn't have been able to do that, and wouldn't have been in the house if, among other people, Dietrich hadn't helped us.
Many people are pretty shocked to know that actually Dietrich is a veteran. He was not a draft dodger. And I'd like to call up Dennis Greco, who's very active in some of the veterans groups in our area. Dennis?
My first close encounter with Dietrich came from the fallout of the Raven Cave. I was vice president of the D&H Canal Historical Society at the time, and was the only official who would go on record calling the town to task. And I believe the quote was something along the lines of, you're not being a good neighbor when your first form of communication is to sue the person. I took a lot of heat for that, but a year later I was president of the organization. Sat on that board for 10 years. I'm wearing my Corgi hat, which is another close encounter of the Dietrich. We fought the Section 8 housing project called Creek Locks Commons across the Route 32. I was one of the founders, I was secretary of that organization. It took us 3.5 years to get the town to require a full environmental impact statement. As soon as they dug for soil samples and found dioxin in the soil, which we knew we would because Dietrich told me it was there, the next week the developers were gone. It just took 3.5 years. Michael was one of the key people involved in that project. I sat down with Dietrich in the afternoon and he spent a half an hour with me and he outlined a list of things that had to be done and the order that they had to be done in order for us to be successful. We used that as our blueprint and ultimately we were successful. So yes, you're talking to an old soldier. I'm one of the lucky ones. I survived a double parachute malfunction. I was in the 82nd Airborne and only spent 3 years in the hospital. But still a fighter, still a soldier, and that's one of the things that Dietrich and I share as kindred spirits.
I'd like to call up Abba, who's known Dietrich for a very long time. I'm not even sure how long.
30 years.
Okay.
I moved to Rosendale in 1979. The first person that I met was Dietrich. I was looking for Dietrich owned a number of properties on Main Street, and I was looking for a storefront to start a business. And he, you know, at that time, Rosendale was really a one-horse town. It was, I think there were like maybe 13 bars here. You know, up and down Main Street and up Mountain Road, and what is now the pizzeria in the plaza down here was a bowling alley, but there was also a bar. Anyway, Dietrich rented us the storefront, which is now the Soiled Doves next to the movie theater, for $350 a month. It was like a steal. It was a beautiful building, and he just allowed us to do whatever we wanted. He was helpful in everything that we did, and ever since then, you know, from that point on. Every time I would run into him, it was like, "Hi, Alba, how are you? What are you doing?" You know, it's like he was just the most amazing person, just the most amazing person. I love Dietrich, and when I was told that you know, he had a massive heart attack, it was such a shock. I just can't imagine him not being around. Anyway, he is around. He is around. He's around in all of us. And, you know, I'm so appreciative and so grateful that he was the first person that I met when I moved here. Thanks.
People often ask how Dietrich and I met. Was it some kind of a project we were working on or some big thing we were doing? Well, actually, Dietrich and I were neighbors. I lived in a storefront on Main Street, and Dietrich had his plumbing and little construction shop next door. One day I was leaving the building. I had just made a fresh batch of tofu from scratch. probably the only person on earth, and I was going to offer some to him. Little did I know he was quite a carnivore. I was leaving the building as Dietrich